Over the past week, there's been a lot of rumors that EA is remaking the original Dead Space. Visceral Games, the original developers of Dead Space, have been shut down for close to 5 years, and Dead Space 3 is over 8 years old, but the franchise has remained extremely popular over the years. Fans have been clamoring for a fourth installment for years, and it seems like EA is finally starting to deliver. The official Dead Space YouTube channel, which hasn't posted a video since 2013, recently changed its profile picture to the Dead Space 1 cover art. There's also an EA showcase later this month, which has people thinking they might bring back Dead Space there. It makes a lot of sense given how well the Resident Evil franchise is currently doing, and when you break it down to its simplest form, Dead Space is a Resident Evil 4 clone, so it would make a lot of sense for this to happen. Dead Space is one of my favorite video game franchises of all time. The first two are some of my all-time favorites, and I've been waiting for more installments for years, but accepted it was never going to happen after Visceral Games shut down. So if Dead Space is being remade, I have very high expectations, and with that in mind, here's what I think Dead Space needs for a successful remake. The Dead Space remake needs to be faithful to the original. The original Dead Space has remained popular for so long because it is a good game, and they need to keep its core elements for the remake to be successful. That means they need to stick to the survival horror genre. The third game started to delve into action a little too much for people's taste, and if EA wants to compete with Resident Evil, it has to be survival horror. And it has to be just as violent and gory as the original. The original game was intended to shock and disturb, and that is a core part of the game. Part of me is very worried that EA will have seen that Resident Evil 7 was too much for some people and preemptively toned down the violence to make the game more accessible. I don't think it needs to be over the top or excessive, but it needs to match the original. Another core part of Dead Space that cannot change is the heads-up display. Dead Space had a very unique and natural way to give players information about their health and ammo supply, and that made the world extremely immersive and separated the game from other horror games out there. If I see gameplay of a new Dead Space with a health and ammo bar lazily slapped in one of the corners, I'm writing the game off as a failure right then and there. Another thing that's critical for Dead Space to avoid is making it a live service type game. If there is a battle pass for Dead Space, I'm writing the game off as a failure. I'm okay with small microtransactions if you want to make Isaac's suit look a little different, but I don't need another battle pass designed to waste hours of my time. I will only accept that if they never expire like they're supposed to do in Halo Infinite when it releases. Now, if they're remaking the original Dead Space, I don't think this is going to be a big problem. They're likely not going to add that, given it's a remake. But if this is a Dead Space 4, that is a real possibility that I would like them to avoid. The last thing that Dead Space needs to nail are the graphics. The original Dead Space still looks great in my opinion. Just like Halo Combat Evolved, the graphics are timeless. So in other words, if this is a small graphical update like the Resident Evil 1 and 0 remakes from a few years ago, it's not going to be enough for me to justify buying an entire new game. The graphics need to be on par with the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes, or even better. Also, it needs to look great and run well on both the current and next-gen consoles. It is still currently impossible to find a PS5 or Xbox Series X at retail prices, which means most people are going to be playing this on an Xbox One or PS4. Many of them will be launch day consoles as well. If Dead Space doesn't run well on those old consoles, it's going to have an uphill battle. Those are the core things that Dead Space Remake can't afford to mess up, but there are a few smaller things I'd like from the game. The first is some word about a fourth game. If they're remaking the original Dead Space and are committed to reviving the franchise, then a fourth entry needs to come sooner rather than later. I would assume most people interested in a Dead Space remake at this point have already played the original game, which means it likely won't have the shelf life of the Resident Evil remakes, especially since I don't believe they'll be rebuilding the entire game from the ground up like the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes. The second thing I want is an October release date. It doesn't have to be this October, but I really want the game to release somewhere in the month dedicated to scary things. Halloween Dead Space sounds like a perfect way to get eyes on your game, please don't do what Resident Evil did and release your horror game in the middle of May. And that was everything I want to see out of a Dead Space remake. Ultimately, there's not a whole lot I specifically want. I really just want a faithful recreation of one of the greatest horror games of all time. But those were just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.